Okay, so we're on to the Provisional Government now. Okay, so the February Revolution has kicked out the Tsar. He's gone. The ruling family has gone. The Romanov family that controlled Russia for 300 years is no more. This is a huge deal. People are calling this a revolution of the bourgeois, okay, the bourgeoisie revolution. And that's exactly what it is. And actually what happens is America and Britain and other countries in the West, they send messages to Russia congratulating them for having evolved to the next level of government as far as they see it. Yeah, they expect there to be an elected government, it'll be a democracy, it will run very much like a Western European or America would run, okay? With the president as the head of state, etc., etc. This is what people are expecting to happen. So the first stage of this is we need a temporary government, a stand-in government, and it comes in the form of the Provisional Government. And this is created by members of the old Duma. Remember, the Duma was kind of like the parliament under the Tsar, but they weren't elected, they didn't really have any powers. But these leading men, and they were all men, take charge at this point, and it turns into the Provisional Government. But it has big problems. Okay, what they're waiting for, the Provisional Government, is they're waiting to call something called a Constituent Assembly, which is going to be basically another election where they're going to decide how to draw up the constitution of this new Russia, this new country. And then once that's taken place, they'll have proper elections to the first real democracy in Russia. That's the plan. It doesn't quite go like that, right? Big problems with the Provisional Government. First of all, it was weak. It was weak because it had to share power with another organization that was just down the road in Petrograd called the Petrograd Soviet, okay? Now, the Petrograd Soviet was very popular with the workers and with the soldiers. It was an organization that represented them, and they controlled important things like the railway lines and the post office and the army, yeah, through their army organizations, and because they also controlled the unions, right? Now, in 1917, you can't run a country unless you control the railways and the post office and the army. You know, the railways and the post office, this is like the internet to us today, yeah? Very powerful tool that you need if you want to run the government. So this is one of the huge problems the Provisional Government faces. They're kind of in power, and they're receiving letters from Britain and America saying, congratulations, you're in power. But they struggle to get anything done because they have to get the Petrograd Soviet down the road to agree to anything they want to be done. So there's kind of like a struggle between these two big boys of authority. No one really knows who is properly in charge. Officially, the Provisional Government, but in many areas, unofficially, it's the Soviet, right? So that's the first problem they have. The second problem is legitimacy. Okay, the Provisional Government, like I said, is made up of people from the Duma, and the Duma was mostly selected by and worked with the Tsar. So people see the Provisional Government, see the old men in suits that were still there when the Tsar was in charge, and they think, well, you're just the Tsar's government. Nothing's changed. Why should we listen to you? The whole point of the February Revolution was to get rid of you, and yet you're still claiming to be our leader. So that was another huge issue they have with legitimacy, okay? And the third and final set of decisions, or set of problems they had, was the poor decision-making that they made, right? One of the big question they had to answer was, do we continue fighting the war? And it's a difficult one. People want the war to end, but the Provisional Government also don't want to be looking weak by basically surrendering to the Germans. You know, hundreds of thousands of people have died fighting the Germans, so to almost make their sacrifice and make their deaths meaningless, why would they do that? So it's difficult. So what they decide to do is they decide to carry on fighting, and they launch something called the June Offensive. And at the beginning, they were very hopeful about this, very excited. This was the first kind of military action waged by the new Russia, the bourgeoisie Russia, the bourgeois Russia, and it was a complete disaster. It really was. And remember, it was a military disaster that had turned people against the Tsar, and now the Provisional Government are taking sole responsibility for another military action that goes horribly, horribly wrong. And they're losing land, and the Germans are getting closer and closer and closer to Russia and to Petrograd. So this is ridiculous. Whilst they're doing that, they delay holding off the Constituent Assembly, which is the whole point of them being there, to prepare for the Constitution. So that also makes people think, well, hang on, why are you delaying? Now, they were delaying because they said we're too busy fighting the war. But people thought, well, you're just delaying so you can hold on to power. And the other big problem they had was land reform. Okay, most of Russia, as you know, was peasantry, lived out in the rural areas and were farmers. And they desperately wanted land reform. They didn't want all the land to be owned by these rich lords, these rich nobles, if you like, that controlled all the land. They wanted land that they owned themselves, that they could grow their own food on, they could invest money into, they could really start turning into a little business of their own. And the Provisional Government delays that reform. Okay, so these are the problems the Provisional Government faces. Okay, look onto the revision guide that you've got. Slide 16 is the Provisional Government slide. At least it is at the moment. It's section 7 of the revision guide. Try and answer the 2 questions you've got at the bottom and have a go at answering the extension questions on slide 17, but the next slide across, if it's not slide 17 for you. Okay? Right. Good luck.